thank you so much for having me, and I'm really excited to talk about sleep and to help all the families out there help their child with CP get a better night's rest. I'm just going to quickly. Okay. Sorry. There we go. Okay. So as Lindsay said, I've worked with kids with a variety of different diagnoses. And to give you a little bit of an idea of my background, I have worked with kids with special needs for almost 12 years now. I can't remember. It's been a really long time. And it's actually my work as a Doman method coach and as a child brain developmentalist that brought me to sleep coaching. And I'm very, it's a very special story to share, but I actually learned about sleep coaching and sleep consulting because of a kid with cerebral palsy. One of the families I was working with and one of my patients, he was 18 months old. And mom told me he was waking up probably like 15 to 20 times a night. She was exhausted. He was exhausted. And we were trying to plug away at his therapy programs and things like that. And it just wasn't happening. And when she and I finally started some sleep training techniques with this little guy, within 3 weeks, she had completely reversed his sleep issues. So in 3 weeks, she got him sleeping through the night, sleeping well. And he was one of three. And mom told me a couple months later that she and her husband were expecting their fourth. So they got him sleeping through the night, and the family kept growing. So, it started with that. It started with this little boy. And since then, I've been able to help hundreds of families around the world get their child with special needs sleeping better. So what are we going to discuss today? So today, we're going to go over why sleep is so important for kids with cerebral palsy. I'm going to give you my top recommendations to help your child sleep better starting tonight. And of course, I'm going to go over the 3 common mistakes to avoid. And if you avoid those, you're going to make amazing progress with your child. And then if there are any questions at the end, I'm happy to answer those questions. So first, let's go over why sleep is so important. Now, again, as a child brain developmentalist, my primary the most important thing and the thing that I drive home with my families is that your child getting a good night's rest is crucial for their brain growth and development. When our heads hit the pillow each night, our body and our brain goes through a series of patterns and things that are very important to help the brain do some spring cleaning, get itself organized, and to strengthen and grow the brain cells and the connections between those brain cells in the most efficient way possible. In addition to that, of course, getting a good night's rest, you're going to feel better the next day. It's going to restore your energy. You're generally going to be in a better mood. It helps to boost immunity. For a lot of children with CP that I've worked with, they get sick very easily. And if they're getting a few extra hours of sleep a night, that helps to build up that immunity defense and helps them to stay healthier longer. For some children, making sure that they're getting a good night's rest can actually help to reduce hyperactivity, lack of focus. And I'm actually going to go over that again a little later on in the presentation and explain why not getting good sleep contributes to that hyperactivity. In addition to that, of course, sleep really helps with hormone balance. There's a reason that a lot of athletes sleep way more than an average adult needs. That's because the body, when it's at sleep, actually produces growth hormone naturally. So of course, a lot of athletes are getting 10, 12 hours of sleep a night so that they can naturally produce that. And of course, for a lot of the kids that I work with, they tend to be well underweight. They're smaller than neurotypical kids. And it's actually one of the unusual phenomenons of getting a good night's rest. I'll have parents write me 2-3 months later after working with me saying that their child is literally growing. They're having to buy new clothes, new shoes more frequently. So again, it's for hormone balance and hormone development, getting a good night's rest is really important. And of course, there's so many other really important reasons why any child, regardless if they're neurotypical or they have special needs, why they need a good night's rest. And when a child is well rested and they're better rested, their therapy and their treatments are much more effective. Again, I've seen this in the office myself. When I have a child who is chronically exhausted, we work on the sleep and they come back a few weeks later better rested, we get so much more work done and we see so much better results with the things that we're implementing. If your child is school age, school becomes easier. They're better rested, they're better focused, and their brain has that time at night to process and to organize all that important information that they're learning during the day. And of course, I guess you could say the ripple effects is if your child is resting better, hopefully that means you as a parent, as a caretaker, you're resting better too. So that makes work the next day much easier. You're able to be the advocate and the caretaker for your child that you want to be. So making sure that your child's getting a good night's rest is crucial, really just for the whole family's health. Now, the unfortunate truth is that for many kids with CP, they are chronically sleep deprived. And there's a lot of reasons as to why sleep is is a difficult thing to get. Now, some of the common sleep issues that I see with my kids with cerebral palsy is that it might take a long time for them to initiate sleep. It could take an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours or more. Some of my kids with CP who also have visual issues, they might have schedules that are completely reversed, where they are sleeping during the day and then they're up and partying all night long. In addition to that, frequent nighttime wake-ups, incredibly common for my kids. Now, sometimes frequent nighttime wake-ups, they may be tied to seizures or seizure activity at night. Not always, but if a child's seizures are severe enough or significant enough, like, yes, that's going to cause disruption in sleep. And the unfortunate, kind of vicious cycle around that is when a child's tired and they have seizures, they're more likely to have seizures. But if they're having seizures that are disrupting their sleep, they just kind of go around and around and around and around. So making sure that your child is getting good quality sleep can be really helpful in also staving off seizures at night. Now, for some of my children with CP, they might have very, very tight or rigid muscles. And because of their lack of mobility, they can't find a comfortable position. You and I have the freedom of turning onto our side, putting our arms in a certain position, where some children don't have that. And that can be enough of a disruption at night to affect the quality of sleep. Of course, breathing issues can also be a contributing factor. But despite all of these issues, I find that one of the kind of sneakier common sleep issues for my kids with CP is that they've just kind of learned they need somebody there to help them go to sleep at night. And I think what is unique to the story or the journey for a lot of families who have a child with CP is that those first few months of life can be very touch and go. A lot of times it is in and out of the hospital, multiple doctor's visits, or there's something medically going on where parents have to be with their child 24/7, and that means all night long. So what happens is that as the child gets older, they're healthier, they're stronger. Parents technically don't need to keep being with them at night, but at that point, the child has learned, but that's the only way I can get to sleep. So despite what might be happening in those first few months, of course, parents need to be there. They need to make sure their child is okay. But I think many of my CP parents would say, like, we needed to do that at first, but now we're kind of at a point where it's like, we want to start sleeping too. And that is a totally, totally okay sentiment to have. So what do we do about it? How do we get your child with CP resting better at night? So the first thing that you want to make sure is that you're creating the ideal sleeping space. And I always go over this first for two reasons. Number one, these are your one and done activities. If you handle this, you don't have to worry about it. It's all done, taken care of. You don't have to go back to it. But number two, even if it doesn't happen 100% of the time, when you hear enough stories from parents saying, we made the room darker and for the first time ever, they took a 2-hour nap, or we made the room a little bit cooler and they slept through the night. If it's something as simple as that, we want to make sure that we handle that first. That way it makes our jobs just a little bit easier with any other changes you want to implement. So the three main things you want to be looking at for your child's room is that it should be nice and dark, it should be cool and calm and relaxing. Now, when I say that your child's room should be dark enough, you really shouldn't be able to see your hand in front of you. So if you're standing in your child's room and you've got it extended, if you can still see your hand, it's not dark enough. All right, now, that being said, you can use a nightlight. I'm sorry, if a child is afraid of the dark, we're not going to leave them in the dark. But you want to make sure that your child's nightlight has a warm color. So red, pink, orange, yellow. I found on Amazon a couple months ago, they have these like Himalayan pink salt lamps that you can plug in. They're little night lights, and they work great. They're fantastic for this. So you want to make sure that you keep it a nice warm color if you're going to use a nightlight. I recommend that you don't use any kind of projectors that go up on the ceiling, anything with a blue or purple color. It might actually make it more challenging for your child to sleep at night. Now, when it comes to room temperature, the ideal sleeping temperature for my kids is around 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Or if there are some of you out there watching who need Celsius, 22 degrees Celsius. And that's simply just because when we sleep, our body temperature actually drops a degree or two, and it allows the brain and body to get into the really deep restorative sleep that we need for the brain to be able to do all the important things that it needs to. So if we're in a warm room or a warmer environment, it's going to raise that body temperature. And then, you're just kind of fluctuating in this later stage sleep, which is maybe not as deep. It's not as restorative. And again, just to quickly kind of go back to seizures, in my experience, I find that kids who sleep in a nice, cool environment, the brain doesn't have to work as hard as it needs to keep all of those systems and functions going at night. Which means it needs less oxygen, it needs less glucose, which when those needs go up, sometimes a seizure could happen. So keeping things really nice and cool is crucial to a good night's rest. Now, of course, if your child is immobile, you want to make sure you're avoiding loose bedding. You almost want to treat their sleeping space as if they're a young baby. So no loose bedding, not tons of pillows and things like that if you can avoid it. And of course, in the room itself, you want to make sure there isn't anything too entertaining. So things like TVs or phones or tons of toys, like these are all distractions, and they can all be things that prevent your child from really getting that deep quality sleep that they need. It doesn't have to be totally bare bones either. I'm not saying you got to take everything out, but maybe some of the things that your child might want to get into, maybe they live in another place for at least a little while. Now, just to give you an idea, again, of that darkness in the room. So when I show this scale to parents, I usually recommend that they want to try and get their child's room between 8 to 10 on that scale. Anything less than that is a little bit too much light, which can make it harder for your child to fall asleep, stay asleep. And if early mornings are a big issue, having too much light in the room is is usually the cause. Not always, but usually. So just make sure that your child's room is nice and dark in that case. Okay, now the next thing that we want to assure is that your child has a nice early bedtime. Now, all of us, before I get into what times those are and why, all of us have a sleep-wake cycle called a circadian rhythm, which means that our energy goes up and it goes down within that 24-hour day. Now, the circadian rhythm, it takes its lowest dip at a certain time at night for adults. So for us, it's around 10 o'clock. For kids, that dip happens around 7 to 8. And that is your window of opportunity to put your child to bed. When you hit that window of opportunity, all of the body rhythms are in sync with each other, not just the circadian rhythm. And it becomes much easier for your child to settle into sleep. And that's, again, just because we're hitting that natural window of opportunity. So if your child is under the age of 8, I usually recommend a bedtime between 7 and 8 o'clock. Over 8 years old, you can push that a little bit later. And then for my teenagers, bedtime has to be by 10 o'clock. Now, sometimes this is not always easy with homework and projects and school and stuff like that. But you want to do your best to stick to these timings. And what this allows your child as well is that they're going to bed when Mother Nature is kind of saying like, hey, it's time to go to bed. But it allows them to get the number of hours they need for their age as well. Now, these timings and getting your child to bed early is really crucial in preventing overtiredness. Now, overtiredness in kids looks like being completely disorganized. It looks like hyperactive activity, behavior. So I was speaking to a family this morning, and they said that their little girl, when she starts to get too tired, she gets the zoomies and she is kind of all over the house and can't seem to settle down. And there's actually like a neurological and a physiological reason why that happens. So here's a picture of the brain. Okay. Now, when children are overtired, when they've got a huge sleep debt, they haven't slept well for several nights, what studies have shown is that this area of the brain starts to get disorganized. The brain waves and the activity there start to go a little haywire. Now, it's going to affect sleep because in that exact area, we have that pineal gland, which is releasing melatonin into the system. It's cueing the body to start winding down and going to sleep. So when a child is overtired, again, this area of the brain gets super disorganized, and you're going to see changes in how your child perceives things from a sensory standpoint. It affects behavior, it affects language, it affects balance. There's so many different things that are going to be thrown off when they have that sleep debt. And I've seen many families, when they start to reverse that and their child is getting better rested, that's when we see better focus, better behavior during the day, just more in tune and aware of things in the environment. So, there we go. Sorry, it wasn't changing. So it's really important that we find that ideal bedtime for your child. I would say 18 times out of 20, That 7 to 8 window for my younger guys is exactly where it should be. And I have many parents who will come to me and their child's not falling asleep until 11 o'clock. And when I tell them, okay, now we're going to shift it to 8, they say, Melissa, that's 3 hours earlier than what they're doing right now. Like, are you sure that's not too big of a jump? But within a few nights of really implementing this, they see automatically their child is more settled, more calm, etc. Okay, now bedtime can always be earlier. And this is the time of year with school starting and new therapy and new therapists. Like, kids are really overtired at the end of the day. They've got a lot of sensory input from the classroom. They've got all these new people around them. So I've been hearing from past families who I've worked with a year ago, 2 years ago, saying, now our sleep is off, what's going on? And we're making bedtime earlier just to accommodate for all of that new big stimulation their child is getting during the day. So if your child's sleep was off the night before, if they skipped a nap, like, make bedtime earlier. It allows you to get ahead of that overtiredness. It's a little bit before that like ideal window, but it'll allow your child to get to sleep faster, easier, and avoid many nighttime wake ups. Now, the added benefit to an earlier bedtime is, of course, parents get a little bit of time for themselves. And I have the utmost respect for parents like you out there. I mean, you're not just a parent, you're a nutritionist, you're a lawyer, you're an advocate, you're a nurse, you're a this, you're a that, a teacher, a therapist. Like, you have so many hats. And the day can be really intense for parents as well. So allowing your child to go to bed early, they get the rest they need. You get a few hours at the end of the day just to kind of unwind and unplug yourself a little bit. So take that cue from Mother Nature. She's telling you, hey, hon, get your kid to bed. All right. Now, next thing is that you want to keep a consistent bedtime routine. Now, this is not groundbreaking in any way. And I think that most of the families I work with, this is like the one thing that they've got into play. They know the importance of it. So a bedtime routine is that brain and body connection. It is cueing your child's brain to start shutting down for the night. All right. And it creates predictability going into bedtime. The more predictable that pattern is, the more consistent you are with following that bedtime routine, the easier it's going to be for your child to settle to sleep, stay asleep, etc. And it's just because we're starting off that journey nice and smooth, making sure your child's needs are met before bedtime. Now, depending on your child's age, the bedtime routine should be anywhere between 45 minutes to an hour long. If your child is a baby, like I would say maybe 18 months or younger, that bedtime routine should be shorter. It should be probably around 30 minutes or so. But again, with many kids with CP, we have to make sure that not only the practical needs are met, but if there are any other like sensory needs or anything like that we need to address, we want to get those done in the bedtime routine. Okay. Now, one thing that I recommend for my children who have tight muscles, they have that rigidity, spasticity, I always include a massage in the bedtime routine, just because sometimes, when muscles get a little too tight in the middle of the night, it can be uncomfortable, it can be sore, it can be painful. So doing some massage in the bedtime routine allows us to get ahead of that a little bit. And I always encourage parents to include some kind of magnesium in their child's day. So if your child has really tight muscles, bath time in their bedtime routine should always include a little bit of Epsom salt. If you don't necessarily bathe your child every single day, I know for some of my families, their child might have really sensitive skin or something like that. Including a little bit of magnesium citrate in your child's supplement routine and their diet can help to relax those muscles a little bit and let them feel a little bit more calm going into bedtime. Now, I always, always, always encourage parents to take turns. If your child can do the bedtime routine for you and your partner, they'll be able to do it for a grandparent or a babysitter, an aunt, an uncle. So they have to have that experience. And of course, like, listen, bedtime routine should not be on one person's shoulders if we can avoid it. You want to work as a team. Now, the two things that we're not going to include in your child's bedtime routine is playtime. So any kind of like roughhousing or a lot of like extreme physical activity, and screen time. And I'm going to go to those points in the next couple slides. All right, so what is an example bedtime routine for a child with CP? So maybe we start things off by reading books. Maybe you listen to music, play some quiet games, just something nice and relaxing. Then next, you might do a little bit of stretching, whether that your child can follow along with you or you do it on your child. Stretching is a great way to release any little bit of tension or stress that's built up from the day, where everybody's been really busy with therapy at school, etc. Then we include our massage, we get into our bath time. Then we handle maybe some of the more practical things, brush teeth, potty, PJs. Maybe we read one more book and then it's lights out. Now, I encourage parents to, whatever your child's routine is going to be, feel free to write those steps out and have it for your child to follow along with you. You've got nothing to lose by writing those things down and following it as a team. Now, I see we have one or two questions that have come up in the chat box. Unfortunately, I can't seem to find my mouse, so I'm going to get through the rest of the presentation and then I will answer the questions at the end. So I just sit tight and I will get to those shortly. All right, now I mentioned screen time and physical activity, and it's not that child can't have these things at all. It's just we have to avoid them at certain parts of the day. Now, screens of any kind, cell phone, tablet, laptop, desktop computer, even the TV to a certain point, they emit a very, very strong blue light, which tricks the brain into thinking it's still daytime. So if you're sitting in front of your phone right before bed, chances are you're going to have a harder time getting to sleep. And that's just because this exposure to the cell phone, like I said, it tricks the brain into thinking it's still daytime. So that release of melatonin doesn't happen until much later into the night. So putting your child in front of these things any less than an hour before bed is going to affect how they fall asleep. Now, some parents may say to me, well, Melissa, the screen is part of our bedtime routine. Our child finds it really comforting and they don't have a problem falling asleep. And that may very well be the case, but I think nearly 100% of the time, even if they're able to fall asleep fairly quickly in the beginning of the night, it doesn't mean that sleep is sustaining all the way through. The journey into sleep and to sustain that sleep is going to be rocky. So as I said, we're going to cut screens at least an hour before bedtime. And maybe at first, you just observe how much screen time your child is getting during the day. And I know with COVID, it was really tough because everybody was doing teletherapy. Like we were all in front of screens all day long. But you want to do your best to cap screen time to 90 minutes a day at most, if you can. And if it's, just what I've seen with my kids, any more than that can start to affect the sleep quality, even if you cut it well before 1 hour before bedtime. Now, physical activity. So movement creates the need to sleep. If we're physically active, we're burning off energy and we're taxing the body just enough to say, like, I need to rest. And then the brain takes over and it does what it needs to. So it's really important that kids with CP, they need lots of physical activity. And children with CP, their mobility levels are different from child to child. So if your child is immobile or they're just starting to develop that commando crawl or crawling on hands and knees, they have to have loads of opportunity on the floor to practice that. Some kids, they need a lot of balance input. So if they're working on that balance, it's kind of killing two birds with one stone. They're building their mobility, but they're also getting that proprioceptive and that vestibular balance, and that sensory information too. So ideally, now, if you have a young baby, this might change a little bit, but the ideal is that your child is getting at least an hour, maybe even a little bit more physical activity during the day. And this is important to remember too, because again, as I said, some children, their mobility level does not reflect where they are chronologically. And every child's mobility level is different. But the thing that we kind of have, your child has kind of working against them is that their mobility level might be here, but they're in that 3 or 4 year old body that needs to be going all day long. So we need to give lots of outlets, lots of opportunity for your child to be active in the way that they can be active. Now, make sure you're not doing that too close to bedtime. It might rile things up a little too much. But making sure your child's getting plenty of physical activity is going to help to create that need for that next sleep, whether it's a nap, nighttime, whatever. All right, now finally, I touched on this point at the beginning, but one of the most important things to start getting a child with CP sleeping better, sleeping well through the night, is they need to develop their own strategies to get to sleep. We don't want them relying on an external prop. Now, what is a prop? A prop is simply just something you and I associate with sleep. So pillow and blanket, these are sleep props. If somebody were to take these away tonight and say, hey, good luck, bud, go to sleep, we would have a really hard time doing it. And that's because for decades, we have slept with these two things. It's what our brain and body associate with sleep. And if we have these two things, we can basically make it happen wherever we want, right? If we're in a hotel room, if we're in, visiting grandmom, as long as we have our pillow and blanket, we're going to be in good shape. Now, the props that become red flags or maybe are trickier to navigate around are the ones where your child needs you to make it happen. So some examples of those external props where your child needs you is padding to sleep. So I've had some kids who they'll just need a little pat on the back or on the bum and they're out. But every time they're going to need that help each and every night. Rocking, cradling, sleeping in the car seat, and then parents desperately try to make that slow, careful transition of putting their child down in their bed or in their crib. In some extreme cases, I've had some kids where they will only fall asleep if they're driven around the block for 30 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours, even more. In addition to that, some kids are reliant on a swing. Now, if you have a little baby, maybe that's that little automated swing. Not necessarily for my kids with CP, but some children I work with, they need that swinging input, and that's the only way they can get to sleep. Now, it could even be something as simple as like, you're not touching your child. You don't have to lie down with them or anything like that, but you have to be in that room somehow, whether you're sitting on the floor, lying on the floor, standing in the doorway. But if you were to go away, your child would be very upset. They'd have a hard time initiating their sleep. And in addition to that, sometimes the pacifier can be an issue. Co-sleeping, again, your child at that point, they've learned that sleeping in your bed around you with your pillows and your blankets, that's the only way they can get to sleep. So everybody has that journey from wakefulness to going to sleep. For me, I know, okay, I start off by lying on my right side. I hang out there for a little bit, and then to go to sleep, I go to my left side, I put my arms in a certain position, and then I'm out. Okay. So everybody has that their own individual journey. And it's important to point this out, because if we are to wake up in the middle of the night, and yes, we do very briefly, we don't remember it, but we do wake up several times a night, we're going to use those same exact strategies to get ourselves back to sleep. So I know if I'm up, I'll toss and turn a little bit, but chances are I'm going to end up on my left side and get myself back to sleep. So having that independence allows your child to initiate that journey on their own. And when they have those middle of the night wake ups, to restart that journey on their own without needing that help. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow your child's sleep to consolidate. It's going to be able to stay deep in those deeper stages of sleep. Your child is going to wake up better rested. They're going to wake up later in the morning. So if your child is able to do this on their own, they're going to get the biggest bang for their buck, so to speak, and get that best quality rest. Now, the 3 common mistakes to avoid when it comes to helping your child sleep better is making bedtime later or skipping naps. This is something that I will still hear doctors and therapists and grandmoms and these people and that people still suggest to make your child go to sleep. And I think the idea, of course, behind that is, well, let's keep them up as late as possible. We'll get them exhausted, and then they'll just zonk out at night. But nothing can be further from the truth. And now you know why. It's because it throws off those areas of the brain that dictate sleep. So don't make bedtime later necessarily. Skipping naps, especially kids with CP, they get a lot of stimulation. They need to work extra hard to make those next movements, next steps, whatever. They need that rest during the day. So make sure that you're keeping all of these things on track, because guess what? It's going to bite you in the butt if you start making those things later and such. Of course, not enough physical activity. Very often when I have parents who come back to me after sleep training their child with CP, very often they'll say, Melissa, like things have been kind of off. We haven't been getting as good quality sleep. My child's up a bunch of times a night. What's happening? The very first thing I ask them about is what's going on with therapy? What's happening? And a lot of times it is paired up with a time where they're maybe shifting therapists. They're not doing as much as at home. Their child has kind of been off their schedule. So that's often the very first thing that we get started again to get that sleep back on track. Now, this one's a little bit tougher, and that is sometimes when parents go to make changes, they say, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to get Johnny sleeping on his own. We're going to, get that routine in place, blah, 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 blah. And they try it for a couple nights and then things don't go well. And they say, well, geez, maybe this isn't right. Maybe I'm not doing it right, or this isn't going to work. And they throw in the towel too quickly. But we have to keep in mind that making changes to anybody's habits, whether it's sleep, eating, whatever, like it doesn't happen overnight, right? We all know, like, come January 1st, we all try to eat a little bit better. We want to lose weight. And what usually happens? After a week or so, we kind of lose track of those new habits we're trying to put into place. So make sure that whatever changes you implement with your child, whether it's tonight, next week, whatever, if it's one of these things, if it's all of these things, stick with it. Give your child a little bit of time. If it's going beyond like a week or two and things are still not getting the traction, that's maybe the time you would reach out to me and maybe ask your questions about what changes you've implemented with your child. But over the last 5 years of coaching parents on their child's sleep and what have you tried and investigating, very often parents just don't stick to it long enough. And when you realize and you know that habits take several weeks to get put into place, that you're actually making changes in the brain, every parent at that point becomes a bit more understanding, and they realize, oh, yeah, you know what? That makes total sense. Like, my child just needs more time to process and to learn. So give your child that chance. Now, this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning. And these are, again, the foundations of what I teach my families. And a good night's rest is possible for your child. I have seen some parents who have been told by their doctors and their therapists that there's nothing to be done. It's just, this is how it's supposed to be for kids with CP, learn to live with it. But it's just not the case. So often when you get to the root of that problem and you dig down deep and you figure out, like, okay, what are the issues with my child's sleep? When you start to get to the root cause and you solve those things, that's when we see success. Okay. But I know and I understand the challenge is how to do this, what to get started with. If things aren't going well, what did we do wrong? What changes should I be making? Is my child, like, them doing this at 2 a.m., is that normal? Am I supposed to be expecting that in this process? There's so many what ifs and there's so many questions that can come up. And I never, ever, ever want parents to feel like that they've not succeeded with it. This is something you and your child can succeed with, no question. So that's why I created the Special Needs Sleep Program. Now, this program is your tool and your open doorway, so to speak, to that good night's rest for your child. The program is 6 weeks, and that includes weekly support from me. You're going to get access to all the tools that you need to help your child sleep better. And you have access to those things for an entire year. And I do that because I know things might be going great. We might hit a little snag, and I want to make sure that you know exactly what to do if you hit those obstacles. Okay. Now, this program is a teach one, teach all approach. So it's a small group coaching program. And that weekly support that you get from me, these are live Q&A sessions. You come in, you say, hey, Melissa, like, this is what we implemented. This is what's working. These are our questions. But you're there with a community of parents. So you don't feel like you're all alone in this process. You know that there are other currently not well-rested parents who are going through the same journey as you. But by having this little group community, like I said, you're getting the answers to your questions, but you're learning from the experiences and the questions of other parents. And every single time I do the course, a parent will say, I didn't even think I had that question, but I'm so glad that so-and-so asked that, because wow, like, that makes total sense for my child. Okay. So again, that community support, that is what's going to lead to ultimate success. You've got that coach there saying, hey, you're doing great. Let's change this. Let's do that. And then you've got all of those people in your community behind you saying, you've got this, we're in this together, and we're going to see that success. So if you're interested in learning more about the Special Needs Sleep Program, you can schedule a call with me here. And during those calls, I just ask for more information about your child's sleep. We dig a little bit, we figure out what the root causes are, and then we'll talk about how the Special Needs Sleep Program can help your child with their specific sleep issues. Now, to learn more, this is where you can find me. You have my website, on Facebook at Melissa Doman Sleep Consulting, on Instagram. You can find me at Special Needs Sleep Coach. Now, I've gotten a lot of new follows in the last couple weeks, and I suspect it's quite a few of you out there from the conference. So I appreciate that. Thank you. And on my website, on my social media platforms, I am constantly posting free tips, blog posts, all sorts of information and things to help you and your child get the best night's rest possible and to feel that support in that journey. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I know we have a couple questions down here. So Glenn asked a question, what about baths with magnesium Epsom salts? Yes. Does magnesium production stop with supplementation in the body? So yeah, so Epsom salts are a natural source of magnesium, Glenn. So it's yeah, so it's a great way for the body to absorb it. Now I do have some kids supplement with like an actual like powder, gummy, liquid magnesium. But actually Epsom salt, magnesium is best absorbed through the skin. So it's actually one of the better ways to administer it. But if your child's skin is maybe a little sensitive, like I said before, if they don't get a bath like every single night, then maybe having some kind of magnesium citrate to supplement with would be very helpful. Now, one thing I didn't mention in the presentation is that for a lot of my kids with CP, digestion is a big issue. So they deal with chronic constipation. And actually, the Epsom salt and the magnesium, again, kind of kills two birds with one stone in the sense that it helps to relax that muscle tone, helps your child feel more calm and relaxed going into bed, but it also gets things moving too. So if constipation is also an issue for your child, it's definitely worth considering and trying with your child. Okay, so, all right, that's that. And then let me see in the chat box. Oh, somebody's saying sleep is so important. Yes, absolutely. It's super important. Okay, so any other questions? Feel free to type them in the chat box. All righty. Okay, I guess that's it. Well, to everybody that's tuned in today, thank you so much. I really appreciate you tuning in and getting this information. If you are watching this later, absolutely, thank you for for your interest. And should you have any questions for me down the line, feel free to reach out on social media to my email. I'm more than happy to answer them.
Melissa, it looks like Glenn does have a follow-up question for you.
Oh, perfect. Okay, wonderful.
It says, to be clear, worried that supplementing with baths will interfere with body's own production.
Okay, thank you, Glenn. Totally. Okay, now I understand the question. Okay, so look, actually, most of us are have chronically low levels of magnesium. And it's just because of the foods we eat, the things that we're exposed to. So I know in my experience, it doesn't actually deplete levels of levels of magnesium that we naturally produce, just because we have to get it from food sources and things like that. So I would not worry about that at all. And frankly, all of us could use a little more magnesium anyway. So, so you should be okay. Now, that being like, I think, trying to think, there's been one or two kids that I worked with where just because of like history of really bad cardiac issues, we had to be careful about the amount of magnesium that they get. So if your child has a history of like really bad heart issues, you may just want to double check it and clear it with your child's pediatrician first before starting a magnesium supplement. But, you know, in my 5 years of doing this and teaching over 300 families, we're talking about maybe 2 cases where this might be an issue. Okay, you got it, Glenn. All right, wonderful. Okay, Lindsay, I think that's it, right?
I'm not seeing any more questions in either the chat or the question and answer box.
Okay.
We did just have somebody else join. Oh, it looks like they just got off. So it looks like, yeah, that's probably the end of it. I do have a question for myself though.
Sure.
Well, actually my daughter, do
Yeah.
you feel that weather would cause sleeping issues? So we live in Vermont,
Yeah.
and I feel like in the winter months, my daughter sleeps a lot better
Hmm.
than she does in the summer months, which is usually the opposite of what I've noticed in most kids. And I don't know if it's like a seasonal depression thing because she goes in, she doesn't want to be outside or whatnot. Do you notice that more with seasons or weather?
Okay. So so she sleeps better in the winter and not so well in the summer, right?
Yes.
Okay. Um, every once in a while, I'll see something weather or seasonal related. Usually it's not, in my experience, what I've seen, it's not usually like an emotional thing or like a
Okay.
seasonal depression. It's actually something deeper than that. Like I'll have some kids where they maybe have like an underlying seasonal allergy that we don't really know about. And then like it kind of comes to fruition.
Okay.
If she's sleeping better during the winter time, my my initial thoughts are maybe it's cooler and darker, so she's sleeping better because of that. Yeah. So, and then also like there is something to be said about like summertime, like with summer vacation, to every family's a little bit different, but sometimes like kids are off of their usual routine,
Right.
Therapy stops, school stops. So like maybe that could also be a contributor as well. And it's possible there's something maybe emotionally tied to that. Like she's not around her usual people. Yeah, but like I said, I think it's seldom that I see it, but it's usually related to something with like underlying with seasonal allergies. But again, my initial thought is like, it's probably something about the temperature and the light in the room.
Yeah. Cause I noticed that when we changed the room, we got an air conditioner in her room and we got her blackout curtains for the summertime. She actually started sleeping better. So I do feel what you said at the beginning was, it's cooler in the room, it's darker. She just feels more comfortable in the wintertime than she is in the summertime. So we added those things and she did start to sleep better in the summer. So yeah, it completely makes sense. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, honestly, it's some of those simpler things where it's like you put them in the place and it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. The other time of year that I'll usually hear from past families is the summertime. And they're like, they're not sleeping as well. What's going on? And I'm like, is it dark in there? Is it cool in there? And then they usually write and like, oh yeah, you're right. Let's fix that.
Yeah.
And
are they even going to bed because they don't want to? It's summertime. No,
I know. Yeah. Like the being off of the routine and things like that. Yeah. I hear you.
Yeah. No, that was great. And I just want to thank you on behalf of GMSS for being here and letting us come to your home, not per se in your home, but hang out with you. And I thought it was great and I learned so much. So I appreciate it. And I know everybody who was in here appreciates it. And we are just so very thankful to have you here with us. And yeah, we hope to see you soon. And again, if you guys have any questions for Melissa, you can reach out to her after the conference. She is our last speaker of the day, but the recordings will be put up, and I believe you guys will have 24 to 48 hours to look at all of those, make requests to get them through Josh. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it as well.